Kevin Kelly, thank you so much for coming on.
It's my pleasure. I'm delighted to be in conversation with you, and I look forward to this.
I have been looking very much forward to it as well. Can you briefly, for those who may not know who you are, give us an introduction to what you do?
These days, I write about the culture of technology. Previously, I was one of the co-founders of Wired magazine, which I still write for on an occasional basis. But mostly, I'm known for my radical optimism about the future.
Yeah. One of the reasons I've been especially excited to talk to you is because of your book, Excellent Advice for Living. This is a book that I have widely recommended to people that I really care about. And there are some really good, I should say, it's these very easily digestible pieces of advice in there. And some of them I really, really loved, and some of that I could really relate to. There's a few that I did not quite fully understand, which I was hoping we could get into today.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
the
Yeah. So this is a little tiny book
Mhm.
of 450 aphorisms, proverbs, tweets, so to speak. And they're often ancient wisdom that I've kind of channeled into American vernacular. So there may be some lost in translation bits, which I will be happy to kind of try and uncover.
Sure. Okay, really quickly, super sorry to interrupt this episode of the podcast with Kevin Kelly. I hope you're enjoying it so far. This is a good one. If you have not already, I'm just humbly going to ask you real quick to subscribe to the podcast. It helps out so much more than you realize. It does wonders for the podcast, and it is almost effortless for you to do. In return, I promise to keep working hard on delivering these episodes to you every other week. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the episode. One of the first ones so some of these I thought about, but I didn't, I either slightly disagreed perhaps, or I didn't quite understand. And the first one is one of the first ones in the book, actually, and that is being enthusiastic is worth 25 IQ points. What does that mean?
It means that being the smartest person in the room is not enough. That someone who has enthusiasm for life, for a project, may often be much more valuable than someone who is just smarter. And so one of the good news about this is that it's much easier to increase your enthusiasm than it is your intelligence. So if you decide that you are not the smartest person in the room, you can become the most valuable person in the room by having enthusiasm, positivity, by having devotion to the project, by investing into all of these other things that are probably more important than just plain intelligence.
So it's not necessarily about being smart off the get-go, but perhaps about having this desire to learn and to become smarter.
No, enthusiasm is a joy and an excitement and an investment into something. It's not about necessarily learning to be smarter. It's something different. It's a different quality than intelligence. It's the quality of somebody who is giving high energy to encouragement for someone who believes in it, who has belief, who has backing, who is uplifting, who is interested in making the thing work, or the day work, or the time work, or your conversation work. It's a lot of other things other than smartness.
Interesting. The next one is prototype your life, try stuff instead of making grand plans. Does this apply to you all of life, or is there a period in life where this is perhaps more preferable to test out stuff instead of having an actual plan to follow?
It's true for all of life, and it's also true for all of business. It's true for companies and countries. It's true all around. You should be prototyping your life even when you're 71. You should be prototyping life when you're 12. You should be prototyping life when you're a recent graduate. It's a much better way when there is a world that's changing as fast as we are changing. So when the environment is moving very fast, making a plan is just or relying on plans. I mean, you need to think ahead, but relying on the plan is what you don't want to do. You want to make a plan and then understand that you're immediately going to divert from it, and you're just going to run a little prototype. So you want to see as far ahead as you can. You want to have a long view, but you get there by doing lots of little things where you're constantly adapting, constantly changing your course. It's kind of like if you drive a car, you know what we're talking about. Driving a car, if you hold the steering wheel steady, try to point it if you have a plan of where you're going, but in fact, we're constantly adjusting and readjusting, and we're doing a little experiments. Like, well, we'll go here, let me over here, and then I'm going to change over here. So prototyping is a way in which you make things happen, whether it's a book or an event or a degree, whatever it is. You make something happen by doing many versions of it, even versions of it to completion. So like you write a rough draft of something, it means you go all the way through, knowing that you're going to throw that away and you're going to do the next one better. You're going to if you're going to design some furniture, you're going to make something out of cardboard first. And then you're going to throw it away and make one out of plywood. And then you're going to throw it away and you make one out of hardwood. So it's the way in which you are moving forward in your life. And rather than quitting your job and borrowing a lot of money and having a 5-year business plan, it's much better to take $500 and try and make a version of something that you have in mind and see if anybody's interested in it. That's called prototyping. So it's a very, very valuable framework to approach things with the idea that you're going to keep prototyping things while you still have a long-term vision that it may take 10 years or 10 iterations or 10 something of this to succeed.
So how do you feel about setting goals then? Because many people will say you need a very specific plan to reach a very specific goal. You have to be super consistent. You can't steer off this path. What do you feel about that?
Right. So you do want to have goals, but the goal should be finishing the prototype. Right? You want to finish the prototype. My goal is to write the first draft of this book. So I'm going to do 500 words every day for a year, whatever it is. So that's my goal. And then at the end of the time, you can decide, is it worth trying to go further? Rather than say, my goal is to have a New York bestseller. Well, the problem with that is that that's such a long goal. You want to have intermediate goals in between. Well, how do you get there? So you want to say, well, the first step is I want to finish a book. I want to be able to have the book done. So you have all these intermediate things, whereas you may decide along the way, which is true these days, that a New York Times bestseller is really not even what you thought you wanted it, but it's actually not very valuable. It doesn't really sell books. That's really what your concern is. So yes, you can have a notion of a long-term plan, which is good, but to actually get things there and to be successful, you want to have much more immediate, intermediate goals, which are revolving around this idea of iteration, iterating your way, having prototypes, of having experiments that you keep doing and returning to, and that you kind of divide the larger area of where you're trying to go with smaller things, because that allows you to adjust. Because as I said, the you thought you might have had some goal, and then if it takes a long time to get there, things can change, and you want to be able to change where you're headed.
Hmm. Fear is fueled by a lack of imagination. The antidote to fear is not bravery, it looks more like imagination.
Yeah. So I often find that people are afraid because they just lack the imagination to believe or to see an alternative. So they're afraid of starting a business because they could lose all their money. Well, there are so many other possibilities in there that you just need to open up your imagination to imagine other ways of succeeding in that. It's not a binary thing. Very few things in life are binary, where either you win or you lose. So I find that people who are very constantly afraid usually have very small imaginations about the possible outcomes. It's, first of all, they're usually afraid because they're inheriting, or they're taking someone else's worry and making it their own. They're concerned about AI killing everybody. That's a ridiculous idea, but it's out there in Hollywood, and so people can adopt it because they can't really imagine other possibilities.
Mm.
What's the alternative? Um, and so and so when you're afraid, I think you want to work on uh, trying upping your imagination to imagine other possible alternatives and possibilities.
Do you think imagination comes from something that is fostered in us from childhood, or either it's genetic, or is it a skill that can be learned?
All the virtues are unevenly distributed throughout the world genetically, but every single one of the virtues can be improved. So we all start off at different levels of enthusiasm, intelligence, empathy, optimism, but every single one of those is a skill that we can also improve. Unlike, say, your height. All right. So these are very malleable qualities. There is absolutely a genetic component to them, where some people are, significantly more optimistic than other people. But optimism is a skill that you can learn, and we all can become more optimistic. And I am genetically predisposed to optimism, but I have become even more optimistic by choice. And so you can say the same about whether you're punctual, the same about whether you are empathetic. Certainly, there's unevenly distributed in the beginning, but it's a habit and a skill that we can get better at.
How can we get better at getting more imagination then, I suppose?
Right. So the hardest part of imagination, and I know this from working with many people in workshops and others, the hardest part is letting go of what we expect. Okay, of giving up the conventional acceptance. And so little children have that ability because they just don't know. They don't know what is the consensus. And their imaginations seemed to be, for us, incredibly active. And what happens over time is that we get much more reality bound. We get trained, educated to believe in the consensus. And so you have to sort of surrender a little bit, make yourself a little bit childlike and gullible, and kind of believing something that might seem improbable or impossible or unlikely, because that's what the future is going to be. The future is going to be unlikely. I mean, if you went back 20 years from now and you describe what's happening right now, it would be like, that's totally unlikely. That's never going to happen, right? It's never going to happen that, that there was this renegade general in Russia who decided to march on Moscow. That's never going to happen, right? Okay, so it's completely unlikely. And so being able to let go of what we know, and this is a problem. The smarter the people are, the more educated, the more difficult of a problem they have with this is letting go what you expect, letting go what the convention is, letting go of what everybody knows, because usually these people have made their successes by knowing what everybody knows, by being able to be reasonable and realistic. And so this is the hard thing about getting better at imagination is being able to let go of this, to understand that you have to be able to be wrong.
Interesting.
Okay?
Yeah.
So that's the problem. Like, if you are really dedicated to realism, you're really going to be wrong, but you're not ever going to be right. And so to be really right, you have to be willing to be wrong, and that's hard for people. You have to be willing to say something silly or something ridiculous, something improbable, because and people who are good Imagineers will say all kinds of ridiculous things.
It's perhaps about tying back to prototyping, trying out things first, even if it could be wrong.
Things. Right. Be willing to have little mistakes. Prototyping is really kind of a failure management mode, where instead of delaying all your failures to be one catastrophic failure, you want your failures to happen fast, often, small, forward. You want to fail better. And so you want to have all your failures in a way that you can manage them, rather than delaying them so the failure happens all at once and catastrophically.
Right. Don't wait for the storm to pass, dance in the rain. The way I interpreted this, and I'm probably wrong, but a lot of people try to wait for the perfect circumstances to do something. And I think there is value to learning how to manage or how to work or how to function under really bad circumstances.
Right.
Is that what you mean by it?
Yeah. It's in part, like, I'm a photographer. One of the things you realize I've been doing it for 50 or more years, is that there is no bad weather. Some of the best photographs are in the rain. It's when it's raining or snowing or it's overcast. Those are all great days. There is no bad weather for photography. And the same thing in business, say. Sometimes the best time to start something is during a depression, during a recession. That's, for many reasons, one of the best times to do something in business. And so, yeah, you're right. There is no real bad time. It's like, if you get lemons, you make lemonade. It's that kind of a thing where if you try to wait for something that's perfect, the timing issue, you often be disappointed. That's not to say that timing doesn't matter. It absolutely does. But it's luck. And so it's like what they say. It's like, you just want to have lots of lottery tickets. You want to keep going. You don't let the timing interfere. You still go forward. You may keep failing, but then eventually you'll be lucky at the right time and do it. So you can't control the timing. You can only be lucky with the timing.
Right. You can be whatever you want to be, so be the person who ends meetings early. What does this mean?
Exactly what it says. It says that you do a service to everybody. You're a hero. It's to end the meeting early. Get it done. You always want to let people wanting for more. This is the editor's rule. The editor's rule is when you're editing a piece, you want to make it shorter than longer. You want to have people say, "Oh, I wish I could have gone on. I wish I could have kept reading." When you're showing them images in portfolio, you want them to say, "Is there more?" You don't want them thinking, "Oh, I'm glad it's finally over." So the idea of always having them wanting more is this idea of saying as little as possible, showing as little as possible, reducing it all to its minimum.
Ah, interesting. In the garden, dig a $100 hole for a $10
Yeah.
plant.
It's funny because someone else didn't understand that either. The idea is when you are gardening, there's a tendency it's just, what's the word I want? Plants need an easy transition, and you can make the transition easy for a plant by over providing the initial hole. So you're going to dig a hole as if it was for $100 plant, but you're going to only put a smaller plant in it. So you're digging a really big hole for a little plant, and that kind of coddles and cushions the plant. So you're kind of like you're ensuring its success by padding its first home. And so you're giving $100 hole for a tiny plant, and that is to ensure its success. So basically, it says the equivalent would say, make the hole bigger than you think it should be, or make the hole as big as possible when you're putting the plant in.
So transferring that into business, for example, is doing more than what is expected, perhaps?
Yeah, you could say that. You could extend that to over promise. I mean, under promise, over deliver. So you're giving more than what people were expecting. That's a very, very powerful business strategy. You throw in an extra something in the package. They were expecting a book, but they got a book plus a bookmark, whatever it was. And so that would be the kind of equivalent of a $100 hole for $10 plant.
Embrace pronoia, which is the opposite of paranoia. Choose to believe that the entire universe is conspiring behind your back to make you a success.
So paranoia, as we all know, is this idea that the world's conspiring behind your back to take you down. They're all against you. And pronoia is this idea that they're all for you. And you can kind of choose to believe either one. And I just will tell you that if you believe the pronoia version, you'll be much happier. Your life will thrive and prosper. And just it's a work of imagination. Going back to that, if you could imagine, like just pretend that everybody around you is trying to help you. You don't know, you're just going to pretend they are. And that, because you are trusting them and you're grateful to them because you say, you're trying to help me. I know it is. Behind my back, you're not telling me. And you will have a different attitude towards them, and that will actually make them much more giving to you. So you just have to make that kind of little kid pretend the world is trying to help you, and they will. It's very bizarre, but that's the law of the universe.
I definitely see the the pro of believing it that way. My only concern, I think, is people might, I don't know, take it too literal. And if they believe that the universe is going to take care of them, they might, take the hands off the wheel and let, the universe got my back. I don't have to do anything. I can just sit back and relax. Do you know what I mean?
I've never seen that happen.
No?
I've never seen anybody go that far. So if you have an example of someone that's like that, point them to me so I can see them, because I've never seen it. It doesn't. What happens is that because you pretend that other people are trying to help you, you're inspired by that. You are working harder. You are prospering. I've never seen it decide that, oh, I don't have to do anything because everything's taken care of for me by the universe. I've just never ever seen that.
Right. No, I mean, makes sense, and I completely agree. It in the grand scheme of things, being pronoia is a lot better than being paranoid.
Yeah, I don't think there's any downside to it.
Right. Here are some of the ones that I really love because a lot of them were super relatable to me. The first one, treating a person to a meal never fails and is so easy to do. It's powerful with old friends and a great way to make new friends. I love this one because there's something super primal about food. You know, we need food to survive. If you look to the animal kingdoms, the alpha male, the animals that the alpha male share his food with is its allies. And perhaps not today for many of us, food is not that scarce necessarily, but it is a thing that it's a survival thing, I suppose. And I love that one.
And another one that you love?
A great way to understand yourself is to seriously reflect on everything you find irritating in others.
Yeah, that's because we're composites of opposites ourselves, and that's usually can even be a sign of our greatest strength. And so because our greatest strengths are usually our greatest weaknesses at the polar opposite. Like there's very little difference between stubbornness and persistence, right? And you need to be persistent, and that can very easily veer into stubbornness. So if you find stubbornness in the people, that's usually an indication of some quality about you that you should be paying attention to.
Right. There was an example of a group of people that I was seeing on a regular basis, and there was this one guy that a great guy, but there was a quality of him that I found irritating, and it was simply because there was a girl that I liked at the time, and he made her laugh so much. And it
Mhm.
was obviously jealousy, and he was super extroverted. I'm a bit more of an introvert. So I suppose the thing that irritated me was the fact that he was better socially than I
Mhm.
was.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So he had a sense of humor or something that um, that made you kind of look into yourself to say, well, what about my sense of humor, or what would it take, and why not, or is that just something that I am missing in my own life?
Yeah, exactly. Because I really the guy was irritating, but he was a great guy. And so it was a really
Yeah.
strange experience, right? To look inwards
Right.
and see why is this person actually irritating? Why do I not like this guy? And it's ending up in my own insecurities.
Sure.
If you are the smartest person in the room, you are in the wrong room. Hang out with and learn from people smarter than yourself. Even better, find smart people who will disagree with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Disagreeing with you is important because you want to constantly be changing your mind, and you want elsewhere in the book, I have another bit of advice that when you're trying to find a partner, whether it's for a romantic partner or a business partner, you want to find someone not that you don't ever disagree with, but that you enjoy disagreeing with. Okay, because you want some disagreement, because you should always be reevaluating what it is that you believe or think you believe. And often what we think we believe, we don't even know because it's been inherited from our families or from our culture or from our education. And you want to be testing those all the time to be sure that you do believe them, to develop them, or else to change your mind. And having some level of disagreement is one of the ways in what that happens. And if you can find people that you really like who can who can agree with humor, or excuse me, disagree with humor or good intentions, or in some ways politely and civilly, these are golden. You really want to keep them.
I think someone who is a great example of being in a room with people who are smarter than themselves and have the humility to be there is Joe Rogan, who you could
Mm.
argue is massively successful, but still he keeps he's very he goes with a lot of humility and talks to new people that are constantly smarter than he is on
Mm-hmm.
various different topics, and he constantly seeks to educate himself. Um, yeah, I think he goes great with that quote.
Mm-hmm.
That thing that made you weird as a kid could make you great as an adult if you don't lose it.
Yeah, this it plays to something else I talk about elsewhere in the book about trying to find your own path. And so part of the process of education and civilization is that we get rounded off. And that's a lot of it is sort of necessary in order just to keep working with other people. But there are aspects of it where if too much of that individuality and distinctiveness is rounded off, then we are poorer for it. And so you want to keep going back and trying to uncover and discover what it is that made you different or weird from other people, because there is something. All of us are unique in our combination of genetic gifts, talents, abilities, life experiences, backgrounds. And so maintaining those, or even developing them, making them, improving them, is a constant, takes constant effort to maintain and develop those idiosyncratic differences that we have. And so that thing that made you weird as a kid could make you great. I mean, I'm thinking of, say, there was these boys who were teenagers, and they were into puppets. That's pretty weird when you're a teenage boy and you're kind of like into puppets. Well, that was Jim Henson, and the guy who's later on, Kevin, what's his name, who made Elmo. They were like weird kids, but that was their genius, was that they were totally into puppets and puppetry. And so maintaining that weirdness is tough in the face of people's expectations, social norms, what everybody thinks that a young guy should be. And so it'll take a lot of effort. And this is a reminder that you might have been weird as a kid, but if take that as a feature, not as a bug.
Right. What can people do to avoid losing it? And if they have lost it, can they get it back?
I think they can get it back. Yes. I've seen that happen. People kind of recover what they were childhood interests and allowed themselves to be different. I think you have to I think it does take a certain, there's an art to it. Okay. You can get better at this. And that is that you don't want, you cannot truly become yourself by yourself. You actually weirdly, paradoxically need the entire world to help you become unique. So you can't get to this place where you're weird and knowing how you're weird just by yourself. You can't just sort of ignore everyone else and march along. It's a weird thing that in order for you to kind of keep your weirdness, you only can do it with the help of other people. So you can't become truly yourself by yourself. And that's because we are opaque to ourselves. We don't know. We may not even know what truly is the weird part of us. We need other people around us to help us see who we are and who we're becoming. You need family and friends and colleagues and customers and clients to help you see who it is, what you're doing, who you are, who you're becoming. And so, so this process of, as you know, saying, of like maintaining your weirdness, you need to do it in conjunction with other people around you who can help you say, well, that, you know, what you're, this part of you that you're doing is really unique and cool, and we should see more of it. And that part there, I'm not sure we should see more of. And so there has to be this sense of which you are becoming valuable to those who are around you, and they can help you see what that is. They can help you see yourself, because we humans are particularly opaque to our own motivations. We have language that helps us access our internal state, but it's not sufficient. That's why therapists and other things are so important, because we need that outside view to help see ourselves. We can't really see ourselves by ourselves.
So other people can help us get it back or help us keep it, not lose it, but they can
Right.
ironically also be the cost that we lose it because of their judgment.
Right. Exactly. Right. So it's a real art. You have to constantly be asking yourself whether this is authentic or not, whether there's something there, and what is it that's there. And so this is where it comes back to prototyping. You're trying stuff. You're trying, does this work? Does this work? Does this work? So you need feedback. And I say another bit of advice is that if you ask for feedback, you get kind of a critic. But if you ask for advice, you can get a partner. So you want people invested in you. So you ask for people's advice, and they become invested in your project, so to speak. So you need to have that feedback of, how am I doing? And here's another bit of advice too, is when someone tells you something is wrong, they're usually right. When they tell you how to fix it, they're usually wrong. That's because we very easily can see what's wrong. Saying things that are wrong is cheap. It's cheap and easy to see what's wrong with things. It's very, very hard to figure out what works, what will be right, what works. So when people are giving you advice or something, when they tell you something is wrong, pay attention, because they're probably right. But if they give advice about how to fix it, they're usually going to be wrong, because it's much harder to fix something. So that's where you need imagination and all these other things. So living our lives is sort of this constant balance between paying attention to what people say and ignoring what they say. Okay. And so you need both. It's like the editor and the creator and editor. You need both. When you're making something new, that Genesis moment, you have to be protected from judgment. You have to have complete absence of judgment. Like a new idea, it could be ridiculous, silly. You don't want the editor around saying that's a terrible idea, that's a bad idea, that's silly, it's stupid. In the beginning, when you're creating, you want to fence off all judgment from yourself, from other people. Just like, I'm just going to go crazy. I'm going to make 500 bad ideas. I'm going to make a lot of bad things. Okay, and in that moment, and some of the stupidest ideas will be some of the keys for the best ideas, but you're just going to generate without judgment. And then the next cycle is you bring the editor in, and the editor is ruthless. It could be you, could be other people. They're saying that's stupid. This is, get rid of those. I know you like that one, but it doesn't work. And so here's the 3 that work. And then you take those 3 and you do another cycle where you're improving and creating from those 3 that kind of worked. And then you're protecting it at that moment. from all judgment as you kind of grow it. And then you bring the editor back in, and the editor is going to be ruthless, going to kill everything except a few. And so that cycle is the innovation cycle for everything, for life, whatever it is. You want to have both are needed, both the creative genesis and the pruning, the kind of evolutionary pruning of the stuff, where all of them can't live, only a few can. And so there's sort of a Darwinian sense where you constantly go around and around, and really good, great creators can sometimes meld those together in some ways, but they're actually doing two separate things. They may be doing them at once. But there's a great documentary where you can watch Pablo Picasso paint. They just had a camera and he was painting things, and it was just amazing to see how many times he was just painting over what he had painted. He would paint these things and then paint over and then paint again. I mean, like hundreds. And then at any moment, he was like that. But that was what he was doing, was he was kind of trying to surprise himself, paint something, just paint over that. No. Make something. Oh, no, that doesn't work. So he was going through that cycle, and it looked like it was just one process, but in fact, it was both of them, where he was allowing himself to kind of be crazy and ridiculous, and then, nope, doesn't work. Paint over that. Do it again and again until he got something that surprised him. And so that's how the weirdness part works, is that you need both functions. You have to keep returning to yourself and doing something that where you're willing to look ridiculous or be strange or make a mistake. And then you process that with other people to find out if they can help you discover what you're good at.
Very interesting. I love that Picasso example. I have to watch that.
Yeah,
Sorry? Yeah.
Go ahead.
The last one I have is take the stairs.
Yeah. Take the stairs. Try to incorporate, physical movement into everything you do, rather than having to go to the gym, which you may still need to do. But the idea is that there are cheap alternatives, and that you want to keep moving. You want to keep moving.
Right. I kind of I always take the stairs versus like the escalator or the elevator. And part of the reason is I have this theory that if you create your own problems, so to speak, or do take the hard choice, you will avoid your subconsciousness to create unnecessary problems for you.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that. That may be true. If you make your own problems. Yeah, I'm a little reluctant just to make my world harder on purpose all the time.
So what I think, suffering is inevitable, right? So I
Right.
think if we can create our own problems, we have more control over them, perhaps.
Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional.
Right. That's one of the advice in the book.
I don't think suffering is inevitable. I think pain is inevitable, but suffering is not.
Pain is inevitable, right? So I think if pain is inevitable, I think it's better to create your own problems than letting your subconsciousness create problems for you. Especially, I think today, life is much easier than it was 100,000 years ago, right? And our brains are constantly wired to seek problems. And so now that we don't have these problems, or most of us are very fortunate not to having to worry about getting food, clean drinking water. So our brains look for other problems in us, like, am I too fat? What do people think of me?
Right.
And so I think if we create our own problems, like taking the stairs, as an example, instead of
Will be another example of this. Will be another example besides take the stairs.
I think exercise in general is a good.
Right. But besides exercising, what would be another example of making your own problems?
I think hard work, perhaps working hard for something you aspire to achieve versus
So
doing things for the long term versus short gratification, like instant gratification.
yeah, I'm not sure you're just making your own problems, but one of the things about working hard is that one of the shifts that I advocate is, there's a lot of people who are really concerned about productivity. They want to increase their productivity. They want to, life hack their productivity, make themselves very productive. And that's kind of the Tim Ferriss idea of the 4-hour work week. You kind of want to reduce the things that you need to do so you can just do them in 4 hours. And there's a lot to be said about that, but I think it's often misguided, because rather than trying to aim your life so that you spend as little time as possible doing things, you want to arrange your life so that you find the things that you like, so that you want to spend as much time doing them as possible. You actually want to construct your life so that the things that you should be doing, you should be doing all the time and never stop. It's like, I want to be working on something where I don't ever want to stop working on it. So working in that sense of getting things done, it's not like hardship. It's like, no, like, if I'm painting, if I'm a painter, I want to be able to do something where I can paint forever, all day long, 8 hours, 10 hours. I just love painting. So I want to construct, not to minimize the amount of painting, I want to maximize the amount. And so I don't want to focus too much on the negative part of like trying to reduce things. I think you shift your focus to maximizing the good things.
Right. So working on your mental health, for example, that's hard. That's a hard choice to do instead of letting it wreck you. I think that's a hard choice to take, to actually work on it, because it's very uncomfortable.
Okay. Right. So you're saying work on it rather than postpone it or ignore it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the hard choice. It's the harder option.
Harder choices, yes. If that's what you're saying, go for the harder choice. That's a very cliche, hard choices, easy life, easy choices, hard life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with working on hard choices or taking a hard choice. That's a good advice. Yes.
All right, Kelly. Thank you so much for coming on. It was
That's
good
my
to get
pleasure.
my beliefs tested here.
Already.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time. I appreciate your willingness to ask questions. And I appreciate your giving me the attention. Thank you so much. And then, by the way, the book again is Excellent Advice for Living. Wisdom I wish I'd known earlier. There's 450 of these little things, and maybe some of them will apply to you, to whoever you are.
Great. Is there anything else the audience should know about you before we wrap up?
Well, I write a lot of stuff about technology, but I also have been reviewing cool tools for 30 years. And then I have a free weekly newsletter called Recommendo, where I and my partners recommend each week 6 little tiny brief recommendations of cool stuff. So check that out.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Kevin.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the podcast with Kevin Kelly. If you enjoyed it, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It helps out the podcast so much more than you realize. And in return, I promise to keep working hard on delivering these episodes every other week. Thank you so much. Until next time, take it easy. Peace.